And so basically I'm on a razor's edge financially, emotionally, my career that I've built to try to work, and help people.
But it's been uneasy, like whenever you're doing work, unsure if you're going to get fired, you kind of question like, am I going to be able to do enough in time?
I mean, it's very serious.
What's up? I'm in downtown Manhattan near the Federal Plaza, where for the past 2 months, federal workers have been picketing to demand that Trump and DOGE end their reign of terror over federal employees. Since Trump took office, workers have seen mass layoffs, illegal firings, and emails encouraging their resignation. The seeds of chaos sowed months ago are now blooming in full force, and no agency represents this better than the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or the CFPB. CFPB workers have made up the core of protesters at these weekly pickets, and their bureau has seen some of the most nauseating ups and downs out of any part of the federal government. I've been spending time with protesters from both the CFPB and other parts of the federal workforce, trying to get a feel for what's going on. Here's what they've had to say so far. Can you tell me why you're here today?
I'm here today because this administration and Russell Vogt, the head of CFPB, tried to illegally fire 90% of the agency yesterday.
Yesterday, the Trump administration tried to force through a basically total reduction in force at the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It would have effectively fired the entire staff of the agency.
We virtually shut down the out-of-control CFPB, escorting radical left bureaucrats out of the building and locking the doors behind them.
First, they put a stop work order on all of us, meaning that none of us could do anything, including actions that are required by law.
Yeah, we've been essentially placed on administrative leave, which is arguably an improper usage of administrative leave, but that just means we're not allowed to do any work.
They've told us that we're not allowed to communicate with external parties. Like there's some other rules that they've implemented too, but it's effectively frozen us.
We're still getting paid, so if you're looking for efficiency and cost saving, you've literally done the exact opposite of what you espouse that you want to achieve and do.
2 months ago now, Elon Musk and the Trump administration tried to delete the CFPB. That week, they also fired all probationary and term employees.
A number of our colleagues in the office were probationary employees, were fired out of hand in February illegally.
So everyone who was on probationary period was let go, and they said that our skills didn't meet the needs of the Bureau anymore.
So they were fired. We got them, we and other states and other groups working on this have got them unfired, and now some of them have been refired as of yesterday. So completely inefficient, completely stupid, terrible for morale.
And can you tell me why the CFPB is so critical?
Yeah, definitely. So, you may have credit cards, student loans, pay rent, pay a mortgage. If you have any type of consumer financial product, the CFPB works on that.
The CFPB was created in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, and basically it makes sure that lenders and banks are following the law and being responsible. There are plenty of banks that do that, but when they're cheating people, when they're stealing their money, when they're breaking the law, when they're scamming people, we get their money back and we make them stop doing that.
They've been taking down, I believe, various advice for consumers. Like the Bureau will put out information sheets saying if you wanted to get a mortgage, you should look for this. If you're going to get a student loan, you should look for this. That kind of information, sort of general information. They've taken down a lot of that.
There are cases that we were working on either supervision or enforcement where we were investigating someone, and some of those cases have even been dropped entirely. Like the new CFPB leadership has said we're not pursuing that case anymore.
For several weeks after the administration came in, our front page website was down completely. They just broke it on purpose, and that little image of a dangling power cord as a kind of a screw you to the rest of America, basically. And so we're not even sure exactly how much has been taken down, but we know there's been basically vandalism because the front page was vandalized for several weeks.
This is not something that's casual to break. It's not Twitter. People's privacy is at stake, their tax documents and a lot of information about private citizens' data is like being compromised right now.
You're talking about consumers who are the most vulnerable of vulnerable. People who could not pay, can't get credit for whatever means or reasons, so they're desperate to buy essential home goods, and they were preyed upon. And they're going to continue to be preyed upon.
Because the regulatory authority of the government is what's under attack, and when it comes to environmental protections or workers' protections or consumer protections, those are the things that they're after because they want to make it easier to make money, to make profit, and to operate in a business environment that is unregulated.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created after the 2008 recession and financial crisis to make sure that never happens again. Well, we're not there to make sure it never happens again.
I think personally, I also am just like mostly concerned with the fact that like I'm also like a regular everyday American and I need the CFPB's protections. And so it's concerning to me to think like what happens if the agency doesn't exist? Like even if I lose my job, what happens if the agency isn't there? Who do I go to like when I need help?
We're not able to do our work. We're not able to enforce the laws. What is happening while we're basically asleep at the wheel? That's a very dangerous question and a scary one.
I think it's important to jump in here and contextualize what the workers are saying. As they mentioned, the CFPB is one of the linchpins of the modern financial economy, standing as one of the only regulatory bodies that actively protects consumers from predatory agencies. Since its inception in 2011, the CFPB has helped to return billions of dollars to consumers across the country. Immediately after taking office, Trump made his first move to dismantle the CFPB by firing all the probationary workers both within the Bureau and in other federal agencies. If you're unfamiliar, a probationary employee is a worker that was only recently hired. Typically, the firing of a probationary employee is dealt with on a case-by-case basis, so the protesters used that fact to assert that the mass firing was illegal. Trump's decision was enough to anger CFPB workers into protesting. Since mid-February then, CFPB workers and other union allies have been picketing in front of the Federal Plaza on a weekly basis. For a moment, their grievances were reflected in the courts, as some federal judges forced Trump to reverse his firings soon after he carried them out. This decision was impermanent though, and a long chain of judicial back and forths have now left federal workers in employment limbo. Just recently, in the middle of one of the protests, further news broke that Trump got the judicial okay to go ahead with his firing of probationary workers. As a result of the chaos, some workers, such as Jasmine here, have found themselves fired and rehired multiple times over. Back in February, she was fired due to her status as a probationary employee. After a judge blocked that decision, though, she was brought back. Just last week, she found herself unemployed again as the Trump administration moved to fire almost 90% of the CFPB, regardless of what type of employee they were. Less than 24 hours after that decision broke, a judge blocked it, and Jasmine was right back to work. When combined with the very shameless attempts to bully workers out of their jobs and the way that the CFPB's regulatory work has functionally halted since Trump took office, it's hard to believe that this sense of panic is anything but intentional.
Have you heard the term like flood the zone, where they're basically trying to like bombard us with like all of this horrible stuff all the time?
I said, all we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with 3 things. They'll bite on one and we'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover.
Like, that has been their strategy. Like, their strategy is to cause chaos. Their strategy is to cause confusion. Their strategy is to overwhelm us.
The impacts that a lot of people are feeling are just fear and anxiety, intentional. Spreading fear and anxiety to try to scare people into leaving, into taking things like the deferred resignation program, into complying in advance with political demands that undermine the mission that I feel I do in my job.
They've been kind of taking away our worker rights, violating our contract, and trying to bully us into leaving of our own accord. They've been offering incentives like a delayed resignation program where they say, hey, look, you can sit home until September and get paid and not have to endure this torture, and they remove you, and you give up your rights when you take that. Or they say you can take your chances and stick around and see if you're going to get fired. Oh, by the way, we may be getting rid of anywhere from 20% to 40% of the workforce.
One notable detail about the CFPB, and one that workers will not let you forget if you go to any of their protests, is that the Bureau is headed by one Russell Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget under Trump. Can you tell me who Russell Vought is?
Yeah, Russell Vought is the acting director right now of the CFPB. He's also, I believe, one of the head people of Project 2025.
He is the acting director. He's not the actual director of our agency, but nevertheless, he sought to fire literally 90% of the agency to prevent us from doing the job we were hired to do, which is to enforce consumer protection laws.
Vought is consistently cited in the press as being one of the most crucial figures in the new Trump administration. As an avowed Christian nationalist and one of the architects of the infamous Project 2025, Vought is the ideological embodiment of the MAGA movement in the post-Biden era. In a secretly recorded conversation leaked by CNN, Vought openly discussed his aspirations to restructure the federal government and do away with the deep state of federal bureaucracy. In his vision, he saw mass defunding, impoundment, and the elimination of bureaucratic independence, all things that we've seen already with the CFPB and other agencies.
After the pandemic, there is a widespread sense among the richest people in the world that regular working people were getting too much confidence. There was even some CEO, some Australian CEO at some bigwig exec conference a couple of years ago who infamously said, we have to remind working people that they work for us and we don't work for them.
We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40-50% in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around.
That's the mindset that's here.
While Vought is busy warring against the deep state, though, he has put the lives of thousands of workers and even more consumers at peril.
January was crazy.
People who work for government are just like regular people too. They have families. Some have had I don't want to get too much into people's health issues, but some really severe health stuff they're going through.
And it hurts. I mean, I have a baby at home, I have a newborn, and it's been just miserable.
Some people have publicly been very pregnant, and suddenly when they were illegally fired the first time around, suddenly had no health care or things were getting messed up. And so now they're having extreme health issues with a sudden loss of health care when they should legally have health care. And that was really concerning to me.
My son was born in early February. While I was in the hospital, I was put on administrative leave, and I basically knew I felt like I would lose my job. But for an emergency filing in the court, I would have had no medical insurance to pay for my son's birth, which, as you can imagine, are hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was getting these bills from the hospital, but I couldn't add my son to the insurance because I wouldn't be an employee. And so it was me fighting with people in HR to try to figure out how I can get my son on my insurance so that these $200,000, $300,000 hospital bills get paid. But then there's no one in HR because they fired a bunch of people there too. And so there was no one that could help me. And only by the grace of an emergency court order did my financial stability not get ruined in, who knows, forever, maybe in perpetuity. And so basically I'm on a razor's edge financially, emotionally. My career that I've built to try to work, and help people. I mean, it's very serious.
The long-term effects of these decisions might be even more consequential than the short term. Amidst all this chaos, Trump not so discreetly banned collective bargaining rights for various government agencies. The move, reminiscent of some highly controversial decisions on the state level from the last decade, signify a further erosion in the rights of workers. The implications of these decisions for both public and private sector workers are terrifying.
They came for the federal employees first because I believe we were the front line that stopped the last Trump administration from, consolidating their power. They tried to end union work in the federal sector towards the end of the administration, but they were foiled by federal employees.
It's clearly an attack on labor in general, and our rights. And so I think that's definitely very scary.
Federal unions everywhere, in my mind, are the canary in the coal mine. They're the easiest organized labor for the administration to attack. And if they can pick us off one by one, then they can come for other public sector unions and private sector unions. And there won't be a strong enough collective voice to oppose those attacks.
This time they came for us right away because they know that we are the front line of defense against what we've come to accept as the American way of life, where, you have an opportunity, as just, maybe not a moneyed person, but to make something of yourself, and have your rights.
This is a bad faith execution of what's really an ideological vision for remaking not just the government, but all of society in such a way that it's harder to be a regular working person, and much easier to be a billionaire, to make money off of an economy that's largely unregulated, if not entirely unregulated. This is a laissez-faire, wet dream capitalism for some of the sickest people on earth who just want to get richer.
We know the types of bosses they are. Like, they're making their people work in factories, natural disasters. They're making other people work like 80 hours a week. I think that to them it is a threat that, like, the idea of a public sector job where you can have a job that's 40 hours a week serving the public well-being, like contributing something positive and like having like humane benefits, like I think all of that is a threat to like their business model and how they treat workers. They want to be the only bosses in town, and they're trying to attack organized labor. And it's not just Trump, it's like all of these massively wealthy and powerful people who are doing this.
One of the reasons I think they've politically been able to get away with this is because the people who are the most prominent and unfortunately trusted critics of government in this country are people from the political right who actually don't think the government should exist at all. It's a bad faith critique, it always has been, but they've successfully positioned themselves as the primary critics of government.
Amidst trying times, most workers are just hoping that they can build momentum against Trump and turn that energy into something meaningful.
It's going to ultimately come down to a political struggle. If we can build a social movement powerful enough to beat this back, then I think we have a chance. But we have to look back to the heights of the labor movement, because they didn't give us unions in the first place, because we lobbied them successfully. They gave us these rights because we fought for them, and people struck, and people were willing to take risks and build a proper social movement that made their calculus such that it was better to give people rights than it was to continue to risk the kind of social upheaval.
I think it's critical right now that all organized labor stands up to defend the collective bargaining agreements in the federal workforce.
Courts aren't doing their job. Congress isn't doing their job. I mean, even the Democratic minority in Congress isn't doing its job. Chuck Schumer co-signed everything that is to come by letting the continuing resolution go through last month. Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, basically literally threw his hands up in the air and said, there's nothing we can do, it's their government.
They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. What leverage do we have?
The checks and balances that we learn about in school just aren't working. So we need to find the tradition of the labor movement that can be the check and the balance against a government that is attempting to turn towards real autocracy and oligarchy.
At the end of the day, if we want to turn the ship around, it's going to have to come from the people, because Congress, the numbers aren't there to pass the legislation. So we need bigger gatherings. We need people that are not just affected, but see the effects of what's being done to get out there and get motivated before too much more damage is done. I think that right now is our only solution.